Welcome to mediamelanietv. Today I'm back to talk about the Pitt Season 2, Episode 3, Hour 3, 9 a.m. And now that we're getting deeper into our caseload here, of the cases we've seen so far, which one do you think has the potential to break our hearts the most? From episodes 1 and 2, watching Evelyn sort of reconciling the passing of her husband Ethan and the fact that she really wasn't aware of it and her struggle with dementia, that was extremely hard for me to watch. But I think, too, now that we've made this connection with Louis across these 3 episodes, he's had a lot of screen time and he's not looking very good. I think there's some potential there for that one to really strike a nerve with us. But Mr. Williams, I don't know. It tears me up seeing his ex-wife coming in and the fact that they're both now kind of realizing, hey, this brain tumor could very much be the reason why our relationship disintegrated, why they ended up getting divorced. And the ex-wife, she looked so concerned about him. And when she decided to stay his emergency contact, that just gave me goosebumps. And I've also just got to say, too, I like the empathy that McKay is demonstrating. She does truly, like Robby said, she is a deep empath, but she's really good at reading people, reading the room, and, for instance, giving them the space to talk instead of just sort of lingering there. I love Dr. McKay. And I'm going to get a little bit more into will she or won't she in terms of breaking medical protocol with this guy that very clearly is into her. However, I also think that the baby situation could come into play, and it could either be super tragic and heartbreaking, or maybe it will end up being some kind of a joyful reunion with the parents, and it's all a big misunderstanding. For now, though, I would love if you would drop down in the comments which case so far at least has struck an emotional nerve with you and which one you think has the most potential over the course of these 15 episodes to really get us. All right, before I get more into my reaction and review of the Pitt Season 2, Episode 3, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video if you haven't already. I am also talking about Tell Me Lies on Hulu, and let me tell you all about Toxic. And coming up on January 28th, School Spirit Season 3. Cannot wait to talk about that supernatural teen drama on Paramount+. But for now, stick with me here as I will be continuing to talk about the Pit. All right, now to get into my 9 a.m. chart notes. The patient, me, presenting with severe code black anxiety after that call came in from Westbridge Hospital. But also I'm having severe PTSD flashbacks to something going up the nose. I'm going to get into this in a second, but let's just say when I was in kindergarten, my brother put something up his nose, and I have such vivid recollections of this day, and that case brought me literally right back there. In assessing myself, I am also emotionally compromised over that moment of Jewish and Muslim solidarity. I think that was a really nice way to weave into this narrative some very current events in the time that we're living in now, and some of the struggles that people have with each other, with other races, with other religions. This was actually a really meaningful moment. So what's the plan for the patient, me? First and foremost, bracing for this Westbridge overflow. Also, monitoring for symptoms of irritation with this whole battle of the brains between Ogilvy and Javadi. Insert eye roll here. But I'm also prescribing immediate quarantine for myself from middle-aged males who are trying to find themselves by riding motorcycles with no helmets. Because apparently, Robby's got some kind of a death wish here. I'm also keeping a close eye on McKay's cackle for possible patient-doctor protocol violations. I will be reevaluating my mental stability at the end of this shift. The Gory Glory Award, you guys. This is a good one. Every week I'm going through, picking 3 cases that are a little bit graphic to watch and picking the goriest of all. Third place, probably the open skull fracture. Never like to see an open head wound. Number 2 is a very specific one for me. And this is the boy that put the beads up his nose. First of all, just like watching things digging up in a nose to remove foreign objects, just not something I like to watch. Same thing with eyes. I don't like things going in eyes, especially needles. Oh my goodness. But the reason why this one hits so hard, I was 5 years old in kindergarten. Every morning we had our chewable vitamins, my brother and I, and one morning, apparently he didn't want to take his vitamin. So where did he put it? He put it up his nose. I had to skip school that day because we had to go to the doctor to try to get the vitamin removed. And apparently from what I remember, and I guess I have to double check with my mom because I think my brother's too young to remember, he was probably, we're 18 months apart, I'm going to say like 3.5 or 4 maybe. But because it was a dissolvable But because the vitamin was dissolvable, it wasn't a situation where they had to remove it. It was naturally going to do its thing. But the flashback I had as soon as I heard that he put those beads up his nose, oh my gosh, sorry to my brother who's probably not watching this video, but if he is, Brad, I apologize. I didn't mean to put it out there, but I mean, I kind of had to, right? But the winner for this week's Gory Glory Award, Mrs. Kovalenko's burn. I love that she tried to treat it with honey, and that was a really fun fact. And I did know that honey had those types of medicinal properties, but I think, like Robby said, that burn is probably like a little bit too deep to be treating at home with honey, but she tried, and I like Emma's reaction to it. And she was like, oh, what do you mean? Is there something funny about honey? And Emma's like, no, I think she was really fascinated by it. But because that burn just grossed me out, it is getting the Gory Glory Award this week. Now, do you agree? Was there something that you thought was a little bit more graphic? Drop it down below and let me know. Let's get into my vitals check. My BP is spiking due to the absolute flurry of F-bombs by Benny Connor's Kylie's dad. Now, I've got to say, I have a little bit of a potty mouth myself, although I do try to keep it very clean here in my videos. I was giggling at that, but also I was like, wow, this is a lot of F-bombs for one public hospital. Yikes. My heart rate sprinting after watching this McKay interaction with the guy with the ankle problem. I love the way that he's yearning for her. But I'm also concerned that she might get herself involved given the comment she made about like needing to get some. Hopefully, she's not going to go against protocol because from what I understand, it is not okay for patients and doctors or nurses to be interacting, having a thing, hooking up, whatever. But because of the nature of the ER and it is sort of an in and out place, are those rules different? I'm not sure. If you are in the medical field, feel free to let me know. The most important vital of all, my oxygen. It is purely depleted right now. And it has been stolen by this hypocrisy of Robby's helmet lie. And in terms of my triage in 10 seconds for this episode, we're going yellow this week. It was green last week, but now that we know we have all of this Westbridge overflow coming in, things are about to get very chaotic. Not quite to red yet, but I have a feeling we'll get there. My medical term of the week. ITP, and I'm going to attempt to actually pronounce this, immune thrombocytopenia, which is a rare autoimmune blood disorder where the immune system mistakenly attacks and destroys platelets. And in context of this episode, 9-year-old Kylie was discovered to have this condition and in fact was not being abused by her parents or her dad's girlfriend. It is a medical condition, and I kind of saw that coming. I don't think they were going to throw the abuse right in our face, although I do think something about Santos's reaction, I think she secretly wanted it to be that, A, because she doesn't like to be wrong, but B, because she seems to feed off of these types of situations. All right, my chief complaint of the episode, it was only 45 minutes, but the shift is supposed to be a full hour. Give me my extra 15 minutes. Anything over 50, okay, fine, but 45, come on, you guys. But it's also making me think that the next episode is going to be like jam-packed. Other complaints that do include terminal jinxing and motorcycle hypocrisy. I am so mad at Robby not wearing that helmet, but him doubling down and actually saying that he does wear a helmet, why are you lying? Obviously, he doesn't want people to know that he must be mentally spiraling because as an ER doctor, I'm sorry, but it is just not okay to not wear a helmet. And because there's been so much talk of this helmet, it was hanging off of his backpack. We had the biker who was told you should have been wearing a helmet. And then the gentleman here riding the motorcycle who ran the red light with the yees. I don't know if things are going to be okay for Dr. Robby in this motorcycle, but the really interesting part too is that Noah Wiley was actually seen reading a very specific novel prior to the start of season 2. It's called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and it's a 1974 novel by Robert M. Pirsig that blends a narrative of a father and son motorcycle trip across America with a deep philosophical inquiry into quality. It's meant to be a self-reckoning, but really, like, Robby is completely failing in this analysis of looking inside of yourself or quality by not wearing a helmet. And there is something in here about a son, and he does have the stepson, Jake, who obviously his relationship is strained after the Leah situation from last season, or I assume that it's strained. But all of this motorcycle talk, it's going to end up paying off big time, and I have a feeling it could be a payoff where Robby doesn't make it to his sabbatical because he's so eager to get out of the hospital that he gets in a crash. Now, if we have a time jump between the seasons, I think it would work, and he could be all healed up by the time season 3 rolls around, which, by the way, is going to be next January. Hallelujah. Or I think I saw this on Matt and Jess TV's video. He could end up being a patient in season 3, which I think would be a really interesting twist as well. One other thing that's kind of starting to grate on me a little bit is this whole battle of the brains between Ogilvy and Javadi. Okay, I get it. You're both very smart, maybe even bordering on genius, but it's getting to look a little bit unprofessional. A little bit of competition is okay, but when it gets to the point when you're just racing so fast to get the information out first, it makes me think there's going to be a situation where one of them is so fast to get this out that they end up making a mistake because they're too concerned with being right or being the first one to say something. And I think that it could circle back to potentially harm one of them and maybe even put one of them out of the running for the residency. Something that I'm also revisiting week to week is Robby's gut check. It's basically Robby versus Dr. Al. I loved the core exchange when Robby asks her, hey, are you going to keep observing me in my natural habitat? You have no idea what I could do next. And all Hashimi deadpan just replies, I'm looking for cooperation, not competition. And then she's the one to suggest that they actually split up and end up circling back, which I was kind of surprised at. And I'm wondering, is she doing this because she really is starting to get the gist of it, like she said, or she's tired of being under Robby's thumb and really actually wants to try to do things her way without him always just butting in and saying, oh no, we do it this way type of situation. Now let's go through some of the character dynamics with a little bit of a pulse check here. Now McKay's pulse, she's beaten fine. Our girl really wants to get some, and the continued comments from the guy in the background with the ankle, I don't think she would put herself at risk by going out with him after they both leave the hospital, but I don't know, why else are they making the McKay storyline like this such a big thing? But the whole cackle comment actually really got me. I was gagged at that. And I did mention that moment of solidarity between Perla and Mrs. Kovalenko. It was really refreshing to see an interaction between these two characters of different faiths who do have some contention in the climate that we're living in right now. So to see Mrs. Kovalenko thanking Perla, it gave me goosebumps. I love that moment. I think it's something necessary. And I could sort of see the way things were going when she mentioned how she dropped the urn once she heard the fireworks. And I was thinking maybe this is some kind of a PTSD thing. And then once she mentioned the temple, I was like, okay, this is definitely the direction it's going. And it is, but in a very different way. I just really appreciated something about that Perla interaction with her. There was another comment in here that kind of got me too. Mr. Yi. What's interesting about his case is that he and his wife both came in and he was unconscious and potentially even paralyzed, although it turned out to be critically low potassium, which he will get back and gain function again. But in the meantime, his wife is sitting there super concerned and blaming herself because she's the one who lined up this weekend, the reason they were going. He was stressed out at work. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, when they said that they should probably check her out, they most definitely should have checked her out, because I wrote in my notes, this is going to circle back to where the wife has some kind of unseen injury and the husband's going to be fine. And then when he's recording that message video for her when she's up in surgery, I hope she survives. And actually, this is another one that may have a little bit of potential to break our hearts a little bit. But the comment that really got me is he's sitting there and he says, is this how it really is? You think all these other things in the world are so important, and then you end up here and it really does put everything in perspective. And I don't think anybody wants to end up in that situation, but sometimes it really can be an eye-opener or even a lifesaver. Like Mr. Williams, for instance, he wouldn't have even come into the hospital and found out he had a brain tumor if it hadn't have been for falling and hurting his wrist, which, yes, was the cause of the brain tumor. But the universe does have an interesting way of working sometimes. And I think when patients are able to realize that maybe some of the things that they were focusing on before or not spending enough time with the people they love, situations like this can definitely make you think differently once you're on the other side of it. And then in a couple of my off the charts file notes here, Dr. Melking is back on the floor. Obviously, her head injury isn't too bad, and I'm hoping we don't circle back to something where it ends up coming back later where it's impacting her. Although I would assume because she's in a hospital with other doctors who checked her out, they probably didn't miss any red flags, and probably her biggest concern moving forward is going to be this deposition and now potentially being involved with the whole liquor store robbery situation. But the betting grid, I was so happy to see that back. I thought it was really funny last season when they were betting on how many car doors is this runaway ambulance gonna take off and over-unders on various things. So I'm curious to see exactly what they're gonna be betting on this season. But now let's do a pit stop into each one of these case files. I'm going to start with Jackson Davis, who is the unruly college kid. And as it turns out, the security guard, Tony Chinchillo, great name, by the way, he ended up tasing him, and he was not on drugs. Jackson was not taking anything. There was definitely a racism component in there. But the actor who plays Jackson Davis, his name is Zach Morris. And if you know me, you know I am a 90s girl. Anything that is even tangentially linked to Saved by the Bell or Beverly Hills 90210, count me in. I just happened to look up this actor's name, and when I saw Zach Morris, imagine my delight, and I just had to mention that here. Our girl Kylie Connors, we got her diagnosis of ITP. We also got a fair amount of fighting between her dad and the girlfriend, Gina, and I'm really glad Gina decided to leave because the way that Benny spoke to her, not okay under any circumstance. I understand. He's upset. His daughter's in the hospital. He wasn't there when it happened, and the mother's upset too. It's really no excuse to talk to somebody that way, especially in a public place. The F-bombs were just so freely flowing there. Not to mention, Kylie's 9 years old, and I'm not saying I don't ever swear in front of my kids, but that was really excessive. I've already mentioned Mrs. Kovalenko and Nancy and Mark Yee. Same with Mr. Williams and his tumor, but there's another new patient here, Mr. Montrose. And he's played by Michael Nouri, who you may know from the OC or Damages. Little side note here, Damages stars Rose Byrne, Glenn Close, amazing legal thriller. If you haven't watched it, highly recommend it, and he is in that show. It just brought me right back there, and that's a show that I'm probably going to rewatch at some point because I just thought it was fantastic, 10 out of 10. It's actually interesting because that show was canceled after 3 seasons, but then DirecTV ended up picking it up for the final 2, which I'm glad for because I don't think they were throwaway seasons at all. But I digress. Back into the pit. Now, Mr. Montrose is kind of cute. He's twirling McKay around, and she ends up getting him a donut so he can go and actually sit down and not have to roam around. But it also, like he said, it's in his nature. He is a Walmart greeter. And he actually references the patient passport. And then McKay's like, yeah, we probably should have got a holiday edition of that. And I agree. I don't know that the 4th of July is the right time to be rolling out new procedures and protocols. But again, I don't work in the medical field, so I don't know. I mentioned Duante and the beads up the nose. I thought it was funny. He wanted to shoot them out as snot rockets. Of course, that totally tracks for a boy his age. I enjoyed watching Langdon treating him, though, and going over this fatherhood blessing and what it means. Langdon is definitely coming back in a very introspective role. I think he's owning his actions. He's been very good about that and trying to apologize and make amends with people. Not Robby yet, but I'm thinking that'll be in the last couple of episodes. It does seem like he's putting the work in, though. And just the interaction there, it felt so authentic. And I am really coming around to Dr. Langdon's character. I think I might be more interested in what the amends is going to look like with Santos over Robby. They're both going to be a little bit, Which one do you think is actually going to be harder for him? Drop it in the comments and let me know. Louis' abdomen is still draining. It's flowing like a river, and they're eventually going to get to draining the tooth. I hope they get to draining the tooth. It doesn't really look very good for him. He actually looks like he's getting worse instead of better. Our bacon grease cousins were on the way out, and as it turned out, some of their family members were actually in the ER, and one of them took the wrong sort of medicine. And Dr. Mel King is watching a video of the table of all the different medicines, and they're able to figure out which one he took, but wow, that was a lot of medications. We didn't get a lot on the mystery baby aside from the formula update. And I'm thinking this one is going to be a slow burn. And it also makes sense to not have the baby in every episode because it is difficult working with infants. So if you can do the scheduling in a way where they're not there every day, but we're still dropping in a mention, it still keeps the storyline front and center, but doesn't require baby in every single episode. We've still got Digby there, and Dana recommends that he get a sandwich and a referral for some services. And then Mr. Diaz, the guy who tripped on the rebar, the diabetic, he seems to be improving with insulin, which is a good sign. But those are basically the cases that we're dealing with right now. Mr. Randall got some closure too. We saw him leaving the hospital. They must have been able to get all that blood drained out of there, and now he can commence his anniversary celebrations. And I don't think he's going to make that same mistake again. We didn't get any of Noelle in this episode, who I suspect is Robby's girlfriend, or at least they're dating. And I think, like the baby, that's something that's going to be threaded throughout, but not right front and center in our faces here for every single hour. All right, well, that about covers it. I'd love to know, how are your vitals doing after this episode? Which case do you think is going to break our hearts the most? And any other thoughts or theories that you might have about the Pitt Season 2 so far? I'm going to be back here covering it every week, and I really appreciate you watching along with me. So stick with me for more TV talk. Media Melanie, clicking off.